participants and clicking on the blue raise hand icon at the bottom right of the screen. Your raise hand icon will only be lowered when you have spoken. You will be invited to speak in the order in which hands are raised. Please unmute your microphone when I invite you to speak and mute it again when you have finished speaking. Please note that this meeting will be live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel this evening. Please be mindful, therefore, that members of the public following the meeting via the live stream will be able to see each of us on screen individually. Please announce yourself by name when speaking, and if you want to refer to anything in the officer's report, can you please first clearly state the relevant page number and the paragraph number. And as I said in the last meeting, I will try my very best to take your points in order. If I do slightly get it wrong, I apologise in advance, but I will get round to all of you and allowing all of you to speak. I can see there, Sonia, it looks like we're live, is it? That's right. My very best to take your points in order. If I do slightly get it wrong, I apologise in advance, but I will get round to all of you and allowing all of you to speak.
Okay.
There seems to be quite a delay there, Sonia.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. Right, okay. Good evening, members. Welcome to the Review Committee meeting this evening. I'll start by with agenda item number 1, which is apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Mr. and Councillor Mrs. Shaw and Councillor Mrs. Hoy. Agenda item number 2, which is substitute members. We have Councillor Merrick on behalf of Councillor Mrs. Shaw, Councillor Dray on behalf of Councillor Mr. Shaw, and Councillor Mr. Hoy on behalf of Councillor Mrs. Hoy. Item number 3, which is non-members attending. I don't believe there are any.
There are.
I'm just checking. It's a little bit slow at my end, but
we've got Councillors FD and Councillor Williams.
Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through the names on the right-hand side. I do apologise, just to try and find. Yes, that's right. Councillor FD and Councillor Williams. Welcome this evening. Item number 4, which is to receive minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of July. If members are in agreement for these to be signed, I will sign them as soon as they are available for me to do so. Are members happy?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed, Chair.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much. Item number 5, to receive declarations of interest, including any whipping declarations. If you can just raise your hand. All right. I'll take that as none. So moving on to item number 6, which is COVID-19 initial lessons learned. Members hopefully have had a chance to review the report that's been circulated. And for this report this evening, we welcome Angela Hutchins and Angela Law as well, I believe, for this item. Is that correct?
Certainly, Chair. I will be speaking to this report.
Okay, lovely. Angela, if I could ask you to start, although members have had a chance to read the report, if you could just talk members through and just highlight any particular parts of the report that you would like to raise the awareness of to members, and then answer any questions that may follow. Is that okay?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Happy to.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, a report on COVID-19 and the lessons learned by the Council in managing the global pandemic in the district was originally scheduled to be on your agenda for January 21. And of course, it's a matter for this committee to decide whether it wants to look at the situation again at that juncture. But with the permission of the chair, I brought this report to you earlier than that date with our initial findings to reflect the fact that we are trying to incorporate a process of continual review and learning as we move through this pandemic. Unlike many emergency procedures where we would normally move into contingency planning over a very short period of time, what's become very clear is that pandemic planning is going to see us working in a new way for at least the next 12 to 18 months. So it seemed pertinent to bring a report at this juncture to review. This report was based on feedback from officers and from members, experiences of the leadership team of the council and myself in particular as a Gold Command representative for the council at the Essex Resilience Forum's strategic coordinating group for the pandemic. The council achieved many things throughout the early days of the pandemic. First of all, in terms of communication, setting up new communication lines for members, staff and for the public, and creating specialised and targeted communications for those particular audiences. Decanting an entire office, both from South Street and the Civic Suite in Rayleigh, into an agile working environment, whilst continuing to deliver business as usual and the additional work required of us by government. The financial impact of COVID is something we're still working through. Members will have seen the report from the Section 151 officer for the July return to central government regarding the pressures which the council is experiencing because of COVID, with an allocation from government towards that cost of just over £1 million, but pressures in excess of £1.5 million. We're going to need to keep an eye on that as time progresses and to keep our financial losses under review. The government scheme for income loss mitigation was published just last week, and that covers members' irrecoverable and unavoidable losses from fees and charges. Essentially, the council absorbs the first 5% of planned income loss, and government compensates 75p in the pound for every pound thereafter. So the 151 officer is working through that guidance currently, and further updates will be provided to members, and indeed will be an integral part of the budget planning process that's due to begin in a little over 4 weeks' time. The lessons learned are set out in the report and captured in the next steps that we're planning to take forward in paragraph 6. Broadly, the council responded extremely well to this unprecedented situation. And it's worth remembering that in comparison to our neighbouring authorities, such as Basildon and Southend, the council is very much smaller, and yet we managed to punch above our weight, and with an impressive list of achievements set out in paragraph 3.7 of the report. The council and its partners stepped up. They worked together, they worked well around a unifying challenge. Equal partnerships were created with members of the voluntary community sector and other community partners. Data sharing moved relatively easily between agencies and improved significantly as parts of GDPR were suspended. And the focus on place and community-based interventions really brought to the fore the strength and resilience of our community groups and our residents. Of course, we can always do better, and we should always strive to do better, but and the feedback that has been received as part of this process has been incorporated into the workplace restoration planning, as referenced in the report, our own local outbreak response plan, the Connect programme, the asset development programme, corporate risk management, my ongoing attendance at the Essex Resilience Forum, and real-time learning and emergency plan preparation. But in conclusion, Chairman, I'm extremely proud of the Council's response to the global pandemic and the resilience, commitment and goodwill of the officers who did their very best under these extremely trying circumstances. Chairman, if you have any questions, I should be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. A A few members have indicated to speak, and I will come to you in just one second. I think just on behalf of, as chairman of the review committee, I think it is important to say that this report, as Angela did touch on, is really kind of just giving members an idea and a taster of what exactly has happened so far. I have read through the report and I've got some questions. I think my initial thoughts were it almost seems to have come a little bit too early. Not that that's a bad thing or a criticism, because I think it's right that we did produce a report at this moment in time. But obviously, as things continue to move so quickly, I mean, I think this report was probably finished a good couple of weeks ago, which it had to be, and things have developed so much more just in the last 2 weeks. So I do think members just need to bear in mind, obviously, Angela is here to answer questions, but just bear in mind that this report, I would like to think, is probably going to be the first of maybe a couple or a few that we are going to see coming forward. And I think we just need to bear that in mind for the moment. So I think on that note, I'll go straight over to Councillor Wilkinson, who was the first to indicate to speak. Is that okay, Councillor Wilkinson?
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I was just unmuting myself. Thank you, Chairman. I actually think that before I start, I'd like to recognise the extra demand that was placed on the council officers as well, and it was no mean feat to achieve business as usual and all the extra demands. And I do have a couple of questions and a couple of comments to make about the report, but I don't want that to be lost, the fact that I do recognise that, and I do think it's important to make that point clear. And you know, and I was involved in a lot of the things that were going on as well. My first thought is, when I read this, was about whether it incorporates all of the facts, and there are some negative aspects, and we have to recognise a report for us moving forward has to be critically positive as well as negative, so we recognise the learning from that. The way I've read this report, and it may be me, and I accept it may be me, Chairman, but the way I've read this report is that the officers section of it is all positive, and the only negative side of it has come from the members' comments at the end. And I sort of question why, really, because there are a couple of things which I picked out which I would just like to mention, and I think that it's worthy of mentioning, because I don't think the report is fair entirely because of this. And I'm going to make reference to paragraph 3.4 to start off with. There's only two I'm going to pick out, but the first is paragraph 3.4, where it talks about, at the beginning, 95% of employees were equipped with the technology to ensure they could work remotely. Now, the reason I picked that out, Chairman, is because you or any other member here may or may not be aware, and I know the group leaders here will be aware, because we were having these conversations on the group leaders calls 2 or 3 times a week with the then leader, Councillor Steptoe, and Sean Scrutton, around various aspects of the ability, or rather the inability, of officers to be able to do something simple like printing. Now, the reason that came up was because I discovered in the early stages of the lockdown, and I'm talking right at the time where everybody was banged up in their own homes and weren't allowed out, that the council reverted from its agreed standard policy of public consultation around development and planning, that rather than sending letters out to everybody, they were posting notices outside the premises. This happened in my ward, which is why I was made aware of it. At the very time when people weren't allowed out is the time we as a council chose just to simply put a notice outside houses. And I raised this at the time with Sean Scrutton to be told a couple of things. First of all, it was a nicety, apparently, was his phraseology. But the other thing was that we were told that they didn't have the ability to print. That's why they weren't being done. So as much as I recognise in here the fact that, as Angela has said, moving the staff to an agile working environment is a difficult concept, and I do recognise that. There has to be some recognition that we cannot say that they were equipped, 95% were equipped to do so, without recognition also of the failings, because we did fail when it came to our public consultation around development, and it was something I raised in the group leaders' calls at the time. So I don't think that section of the report is fair. And I have no issues with failings at all, because we learn, but I do think the report needs to be representative of that. The second and final thing I'd like to raise, Chairman, if I may, is paragraph 5.8. And I'm going to paraphrase this really, because this is where members have recognised the lack of emergency planning. And I mean, I personally have spoken to a number of other members, some of whom are senior members of the administration, and it has been generally accepted that emergency planning for Rochdale Council prior to this pandemic was woefully shocking and pretty much non-existent. Now, I do understand that that's something that may be improved moving forward, and I would hope that will be the case. But again, Chairman, there's no reference to that in this report. And so I find it difficult to support this as a report going forward. I don't think it's particularly representative of where we are right now, or where we have been in the months during the lockdown, if that makes sense. And I'd just like to make those 2 points. And I think that, you know, and I recognise the fact that it's been a very, very difficult time, and I don't wish to be critical, I really don't. But I do think that any report that we make, for it to be beneficial for us to move forward, it has to be honest. And I don't feel that it's entirely honest. And that's all I wish to say on the matter, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Angela, would you like to come back to Councillor Wilkinson on one or both of those points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I have to object, Councillor Wilkinson, to the fact, or to any assertion that this report is not honest, because I fundamentally refute that. I take your point around the points that you made around mitigation. The 95% relates to those numbers of users who had been migrated to the Azure platform, and so therefore were capable of working agilely. We've always accepted that there are elements of the council services that have not fully been able to move into the agile environment, and that is reflected in the comments within the report when it talks about those members of staff who are still working on site, and it also talks about paper processes and manual handling, which has not been able to transfer into an agile environment. Those comments do exist. In relation to the specific point you make about printing, that was dealt with at the time. You are quite right, and you did make those representations. I had not included that specific point in the report, not because I don't acknowledge that it was a point not made, but that simply it was not something that came into the overall drafting. But I'm happy to take that away as feedback. In relation to the role of emergency planning, I think I do accept in the report, and officers particularly accepted, the adequacy of emergency planning. It is something that has been considered and needs to continue to be considered. As I mentioned at the beginning of this report, emergency planning is usually and almost exclusively short-term contingency planning in the face of a short-lived emergency. So whether that's flood, fire or famine, it is intended to be a short-lived thing, and usually amounts in business continuity terms amounts to an IT outage. So it's a matter of days, if potentially weeks, not months or even years. So I would question that anybody's business continuity plans would and emergency planning scenario for any district authority, or indeed any organisation in the UK, could say that they were fully prepared for a global pandemic. And of course, therefore, we have to, as I've mentioned, learn as we go. And that's why I would agree, Chair, that this is the first report of a number of reports I'd expect to bring back to review as a process of continual learning and continual feedback. So although I take the feedback that the concerns were raised about emergency planning, those concerns are fully reflected in the report. They are shared both by officers and members alike. But I would not accept that they are woefully inadequate, full stop. In the context of a global pandemic, plans for business continuity for short-term IT outages clearly need to be strengthened. And one of the first things that we've done as part of this initial lessons learned is to strengthen our response to that. And that's why we have a local outbreak response plan, which pulls together all the learning, so that if we end a second spike or a second outbreak, that we are better prepared next time around.
Thank you, Angela. Obviously, just a reminder to everybody. I think obviously the role of the review committee is to act as a critical friend. I think Councillor Wilkinson was quite right in saying that the criticism, I think, is genuinely meant to help and for everybody to learn, officers and members alike. Any criticisms really, and the idea of this report as well is not to blame anybody. The circumstances behind the pandemic were nothing like any of us have experienced before, and it was always going to be difficult to meet everybody's expectations 100%. Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to come back? I didn't know if you wanted to come back on that point. I saw you unmuted.
I did. Actually, you've taken the words out of my mouth. I couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you for saying that. That is precisely where I was coming from. And I did go to great lengths at the start of me speaking to say that I'm trying not to be critical, because I do recognise the good work that was done. And I just feel as though the report, if it's a report of how the council did, I don't think it's an entirely fair reflection. That's all I'm saying, because I think there are aspects that could have been done better. And that's not a criticism, it's an observation. I didn't read it in the report. That's all I'm saying. I couldn't find it, and I've read it a couple of times, and I couldn't find the bits that said that. And that's it. I don't wish to say any more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I mean, we'll take some more questions in a minute. I know that some members, I think I read the report, and the notes that I've made are will be to note this report, but also to guide, because I think at the outset, I can imagine this was probably quite a job to Angela to get this from nothing to just to where we are at the moment, because of how this is moving on. And I think Councillor Wilkinson does make a point. I think there probably are some experiences that we've all experienced that haven't been mentioned in this report, but that may be because there are either too many of them, or we consider them to be smaller issues that make up a larger picture. And I think it's important, I would like to, as a committee, for us to be perhaps guiding Angela with regards to further reports as to exactly what we are expecting to see in future reports, just to provide some assistance. I hope that's just my thoughts anyway. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I think the comments made about critical friend are more than appropriate. And I think the difficulty that we sometimes have is quite naturally when criticism is levelled, it's taken as a negative, and it's invariably meant constructively. And indeed, this committee's major role is to be a critical friend. Returning to the report, I'm afraid I'm going to be a critical friend. The communications and the source of information. In the regular group leader meetings, Councillor Newport has regularly requested for the engagement of those daily briefing notes opened and read, rather than just the impressions of the total number of times sent out. Now, despite these repeated requests, and we're talking about the best part of 5 months now, this information has still not been provided, nor, to my knowledge, collected. Perhaps the officer can report back as when this will be done, because I think that's something that is very important. There is no point in us sending out missives and information, however well written and how important it is, if it's not being opened and read. And that's what we need to know. So that's the point I'd like the office to come back to at perhaps the next review meeting. The receptions, another point here, were understandably shut, and unfortunately the telephone system was at best farcical. Despite many reports, incidents, examples and conversations at the group leaders meetings and elsewhere, this has still not been resolved. Whilst I understand some work has been undertaken, the frustrations, the distress and the confusion for residents attempting to telephone at this difficult time cannot be understated, and the remedy for this needs to be undertaken as a matter of urgency. Again, I would like to see regular updates reported to this committee until this is resolved. The situation and the problems continue. The relocation of officers was to be applauded, and I believe helped by the fact that many officers already worked partly from home. I agree with Councillor Wilkinson that our officers should be applauded, and we should acknowledge the work that they have done in these difficult times, and the continued service delivery was exemplary, bearing in mind the difficult and stressful times that we all endured. I do hope that this will be recognised appropriately in the future. Is the authority taking advantage, and this is a question for the future, and I would like to really reinforce that how well our officers did do with the continued service delivery. I think we have done exceptionally well as a council, and it's good to note positive things. Is the authority taking advantage of the situation of officers working from home to examine future working patterns? And that's something I'm hoping that will be done. And again, I would like to see reported back. I don't expect a detailed answer now. However, I do have a small issue with the accuracy of this report, as not all members were provided with equipment in a timely fashion, despite requests. In fact, I know that one member couldn't attend meetings because he hadn't got equipment. So there were problems. And the other issue is it assumed that members were technically able to operate such equipment without any training, and that they could alter their methods of working without problems. No allowance was or had been made or has been made to those members with difficulties in this respect. Although this was unavoidable at the start, in the 5 months since, the situation remains the same. Consideration should have allowed for greater flexibility and assistance when requested and needed. I'm not sure that this one-size-fits-all complies with the equality and diversity legislation. And a question again, and another question here. I applaud the fact that we housed homeless rough sleepers. Are we still attempting to do so? I'd like that question answered. Again, not necessarily tonight. I'm hoping that we will be doing so, especially as there's a possibility of a spike. There was no mention of the emergency service officers in the report or their involvement, which Angela has clarified, but it does need to be addressed in the future, especially as concerns over the emergency planning have been expressed at this committee for some years. So there is some concern there that we need to go back on, but again, not necessarily tonight. On a much more positive note, the hub served a very important lifeline to some residents, but its delay was, whilst understandable, regrettable. And this is no criticism of our officers. The group leaders will know, the other group leaders will know, but members might not, that the majority of delay was caused by the confusion from central government and from the ever-changing messages. However, if RDC is more proactive, I wonder what steps have been taken to ensure that RDC can be more proactive in the future, rather than relying on someone else's instructions. But having said that, although it served not very many people, but it was still a very necessary and a very important part of our response to the pandemic. So, as I say, I agree that we do need ongoing, with the chair, that we need ongoing reports. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Angela, just touching on what Councillor Mrs Mason has asked there, in particular with regards to information regarding the communications that were sent out as to how many people were actually opening the communications. I think Councillor Mrs Mason was referring to the leader of the council's statement. Would that be right, Councillor Mrs Mason?
No, I'm referring to all the information that we sent out as a council. The briefings are mostly from there. But basically, when something's sent out, you've got a record of something sent out. That's called an impression, basically.
Yeah.
You send it out. You don't know how many people are reading that. You can very easily tell how many people are opening that email. You can also tell, and don't ask me how, because I'm not technical, but you can also tell apparently relatively easily how many people have read that email and perhaps clicked on links. And that's the information that we should be getting, so that we know that our communications are appropriate, are read. And if they're not, if they're ignored, then perhaps we need to put them in a different format or revisit it. So that is critical information. And I do think we need to know when that information is going to be provided.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Angela, did you want to come back, or can you come back? Are you able to come back on any questions that Councillor Mrs Mason raised there? I mean, she did indicate that she was happy, and as the committee will be happy to receive some of those answers at a slightly later date, if you're not able to answer them this evening. But if you can, that would be good.
Chair, I will always follow up with some more detailed information, but I can answer these questions now. In terms of communication, Councillor Mrs Mason's made reference to emails and email receipts. The member briefing note was emailed to, the leaders briefing note was emailed to members. Chair, you may be aware that you can disarm a read receipt on your email, so that is not necessarily indicative of whether it's been read or not. All other communications were sent out either through the website, through social media, or through a Tell Me More. So there are different mechanisms for capturing data depending on the medium by which the information is distributed. We can tell from Tell Me More how many of those missives were opened, and we can tell from the traction on social media how many times our post has been looked at or shared. But that's not the same as knowing how many times it's actually being read. I'm happy to work with comms officers and pull together a short note that explores some of those options for a date, Chair, to be set by you. In relation to telephony, has been explained to Councillor Mrs Mason and other colleagues previously. The council is in the process of moving to a voice over internet protocol contract, which should be in place in November, to replace the current switchboard as is set out in the report, which is physically based in the offices and therefore does not translate into a virtual environment. So that contract will be completed in November. In relation to relocation of officers and taking advantage of working from home to examine future working patterns, that was looked at in terms of Connect, and the report which went to executive in July made specific reference to that point. And as members will see, the asset programme has also considered the impact of COVID-19 in the report that comes to full council next week. Rough sleepers continue to be dealt with by the council, working in partnership with with Chess as our voluntary sector partner, and across Essex County Council entire administrative area. And so rough sleeping and prevention of rough sleeping in connection with the spread of COVID-19 continues to be top of that particular priority and funded by central government. Comments in relation to emergency planning, I think we've already picked those up, and similarly in relation to the hub, part of the local outbreak response plan is a mobilisation plan for standing the hub back up if we ever needed it, and certainly the good relationships that have been fostered as a result of the hub mean that the plans are well in place and practiced, and everybody is willing to stand them back up if required.
Lovely.
Chair, I hope
Thank you, Angela.
helps.
Okay, that's fine.
If I can come back there. Thank you, Angela, for those. I know that some of those have been reported in different venues, but I think they needed to be reported in connection with this report, because they are obviously part or arise from this report. The one thing I can't quite accept as being shall we say acceptable, is the issue with the telephones, because that is ongoing. November, fine, but I mean, I don't want to go into the specifics here because they've already been explained to the senior management team and they're well aware of them. but it doesn't appear to have been resolved, and that some of those things are resolvable without the equipment, and there's still concerns. So I still have concerns over that issue. November is a while away for someone to dial the council and actually get a response, especially when the receptions aren't open. But I appreciate that it's difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Angela, just in terms of Councillor Mrs Mason's point there regarding the telephone system, if the council are aware of particular constituents that may be experiencing those problems, is there any way the council can be more proactive in communicating with them?
Certainly. I mean, if there are individual officers who are being sought, then members can always escalate issues to the relevant assistant director, or indeed myself or the managing director. Residents who have any concerns can email myself or the managing director if they don't feel that they're necessarily getting those communications in the right way. Some of our services are now open to bookable face-to-face appointments with members of the public. So that is now an option for people, particularly who struggle maybe with technology.
Thank you. If I may say that there has been some improvement, so it's not all doom and gloom. And the only thing that I would question is Andrew has advised that she's getting statistics from Tell Me More, etc. But when we've asked for those in group leaders meetings, they've not been forthcoming. So perhaps we can discuss that further on Thursday when we have our next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Chairman, can I just quickly state that unfortunately I'm going to have to leave the meeting early, but I might be back before the end, but unfortunately I've got to leave.
Okay. Okay, not a problem. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, sorry about that. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. If you can just bear with me as well, I'm working off of one computer tonight rather than two, so I'll be flicking, and I can't see what I look like on the screen. So, because I've got a PDF in front of me now, which is not my normal mode of working. Again, I'd like to thank Angela Hutchins for the report. I did start asking for this to be done back in April, believe it or not, in the group leaders meetings, not as a way of blaming anybody, but a way of learning as we go, because I think it's very important that we find out what works, what doesn't work as we go before it's all forgotten, especially moving forward. So I see the idea of this as being constructive, to see what things worked, what went well, and that's exactly what this is trying to do. However, I would disagree with the chairman, if I may, in that sense. Because of that, I don't think this is too early. I think this is one of those reports which is forever being updated, if you follow, from very early, because we're always going to be learning from this for a very long time. And this will also play into our emergency planning and resilience planning of the future as well. With regards to the report itself, I think this is possibly what Councillor Wilkinson was talking about as well. I think, I'm not saying the report is wrong in any way. However, I think it omits things which didn't work, which didn't go too well. Play into our emergency planning and resilience planning of the future as well. I'm not sure who's got repeating me. I don't find that very good. The report itself, I'm hearing myself speak again. That's very confusing. It's certainly not on my computer.
Councillor Stanley has muted again. That's right.
All right, thank you. Was that where it was? Oh dear. Right, I'll start again. So with regard to the report, it says what we did well, and I don't disagree with those things. The hub worked well once it got going, but again, that wasn't really our problem, as Councillor Mason, Mrs Mason said. It was being changed all the time, but it was being done. So what was done was what was wanted, but it took a long time. However, I don't see that we can really say that we did well with waste collection, which I'm not saying we didn't. We did, without saying that leisure didn't work too well, or saying that waste collection worked well, but the bulky waste had to stop for a little while, and it's still not back to normal yet. We're still not doing mattresses, although I think that's going to be very shortly being done again. So this is the problem. They're just a couple of examples. So I think we picked out what worked and what continued, and we've not really put down what didn't continue. And I think the report isn't going to work until we recognise what didn't work. Because if we don't recognise what didn't work, how can we put it right in the future? And to say it didn't work isn't to say we did it badly or we did something wrong. In the way we were configured at the time, it wasn't possible for it to work, perhaps. And this is what I think this report should be doing. It's trying to identify what didn't work as much as what did. And we're not saying what didn't work. That's the first issue. And then there the PDFs are. If I then move on, we're moving on to, I'm not going to repeat everything else everyone has said for a change. We have the lessons learned bit towards the back of the report. So what went well? This is just a few quotes from people. The hub went well. Signage went well. In the trusting staff was genuine. I think in many ways this again isn't really doing what went well. The refuse worked well, but why did it work well? We're saying what went well, but we're not finding out why it worked well. And without finding out why they didn't work well, we can't get that to work in other areas as well. So if we find out why refuse worked well, how can we transfer what went well there to maybe leisure or bulky waste or something like that? That's that point. What could have been done better? There's a lot of thoughts in this again, but there's not really any conclusions. Again, what could have been done differently? There's a mention of a lack of detail here from members. Why haven't we gone back to members to ask them about the detail? I know I've given detail in the group leaders calls, and I know other group leaders have as well. I thought I did give some examples in my feedback that I gave, but if I didn't, I apologise, and I'm happy to give some details of what could have been done differently. And then we have the next steps. And I just like to inquire about paragraph 6.2. We have a COVID-19 local outbreak response plan. It's been put in place and is intended to operate as a whole council business continuity plan. I don't recall having sight of this. Has this been sent to members and I've just missed it? If it hasn't been sent to members, can we have a look at it, please? I think it would be wise for us as members to see it. And I apologise if we have been sent it and I've missed it. That's the comments I'm raising. It's not a criticism of anybody. Again, I'd like to echo what other people have said about officers. They've worked excellently throughout this period, above and beyond their calling, and I have asked for that feedback to be fed back to them, and I hope it has. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mr. Hoy. Angie, did you want to come back to Councillor Mr. Hoy on any of those points that he's raised or any of the specific questions that he's asked? I mean, in particular, he does raise a good point there about 6.2, where you do talk about the local outbreak response plan. I have also made a note just to say I couldn't remember seeing that, and I was surprised that it didn't form part of this report. Have we both missed it, or have members not seen that?
So, Chair, if I can answer that question, specifically because it's an operational delivery document, it's not a policy document, so it doesn't need to go through member governance. I can confirm I finished it this morning, so it is currently going to the leader and deputy for final sign off, and then will be circulated to members for information. It's an operational document, as I say, so and it's intended, as Councillor Hoy so eloquently describes, intended to be a continual learning experience. So it will only ever be as good as the day on which it's written. So we will continue to learn from it, but use it as a framework for that continuous learning. And in that light, really, I'd like to make the comment that this is the first report, I expect, of a number of reports, as you said yourself, Chair, that have greater and more detail in relation to areas of concern or interest that the committee wants to pursue in greater detail. The information contained in the feedback is that which was provided to me by members and officers in relation to the request for feedback. So it is entirely limited to what people actually thought when they were asked that specific question. It's not a deep dive of any particular issues, and I would suggest that that's something that the committee may like to consider for future reports, to do that deep dive exercise in areas such as leisure, for example, where we know that is likely to come back before council before the end of the calendar year. So it's those sorts of things that I think are worth further exploration in the future. But this report was intended to be a starter for 10. It was intended to pull together initial thoughts, feelings, and feedback, and from the first 4 months of the pandemic. As I've said, we'll continue to live with this for the next 12 to 18 months at least, and so it's my full expectation that we'll continue to evolve our learning and to do more work and more detail and gain greater feedback as we go.
Thank you, Angela. If I'll just move on, and because I can see that a few members have indicated to speak, so I do want to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Councillor Gooding.
Sorry about that, Chair. It was stuck. Yes, I'd just like to thank Angela for the report that you've done so far. It is, like you've already said, it is a live document that will be moving forward. So thank you for that. And the excellent emergency services that all the officers, staff, members, residents, all stepped up to the plate and worked with the emergency services for our vulnerable residents, and I thank you for that. That was, I believe, was very well worked. I had loads of very good response from residents that I spoke to, so thank you for that. I accept that, this is only a starter. I'm not going to repeat what everyone else said, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gooding. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and keep it brief. Thank you very much. As Angela's pointed out, this is a starter document, so we just need to keep that in mind. A couple of points. 3.7, the hub. It's great to hear that everyone's poised to be stood up again should it need be. However, as a volunteer myself, I haven't heard a lot more since we finished the recent operation. So it would be interesting to see how those volunteers are being kept engaged. I would support Councillor Mason's suggestion around reviewing the remote working of the staff in more detail, including analysing the efficiencies that we've made, but also the impact on our staff. How are our staff? How did it affect their work-life balance? So if that could be looked at. Outside of this document, I'd also like to know any possible cost savings, of course. And I think, Chairman, you hit the nail on the head. It is for this committee to perhaps suggest that we identify and recommend areas of focus for the next report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Milne.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I made a note because the report is chronological right at the beginning of the events, and then is more anecdotal later on, which is good in a way. But if we were logging what went right and wrong in relation to, say, the contact programme, what stage it's at, where we're going to be at the end of all of this, A couple of things that did occur to me was through the ICT developments, we were already heading towards and had discussed the telephone system. And in a normal environment, that would have gone through in the course of the progress of our upgrading of IT and communications in the contact program, which is good. So I would have liked for the council what went right and wrong, a more chronological approach if we're looking at a later report. So we could say, with respect to this department, this was the main problem, this wasn't fit for purpose, and this is what we're doing, and we sort of split it that way. But obviously, it has been a difficult time with all of this, but what it has shown is that the moving towards hot desking and the move to the Azure cloud, the improvement of IT, is actually going the right way, because this will give us resilience. If this had happened in 18 months' time, I think we would have had a different picture, because there is this development going on in the organisation. So that's a nice thing to add in comments about that when we finally get a final report. The other thing is that I found that as things progressed and we improved our kind of working processes away from the first few days, in dealing with residents who've got problems, I found the chat section on the website very useful. People rang back, and in every case we had a resolution of what the problems were. And considering that they're all working at home and so on, that was working. So that learning has got through at the moment. And I'm pleased to see that the upgrade of the telephone system is being expedited. So I want to thank you for that. But that's just the way I would look at it. So when we're looking at the next report, it would be fairer, as Councillor Wilkinson has mentioned, if it was done on that approach, because then you're not leaving any stones unturned, as it were, and not missing anything out. But you know, for an opener, it gives us a good view of what happened. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Sperring.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to comments made by respective members. A few things I would just like to pick up on, though. I mean, I think Angela has made the point that, you know, this is the first of a number of reports, and Councillor Hoy was hoping for one in April. As you know, I think all members were aware of the pressure that was on both officers and everybody else.
If I may, Chairman, on a point of order, a matter of correcting the information here. I didn't say I asked for a report to be presented in April. I said I was asking for the information to be gathered from April. It's a very important point.
Well, I'm sorry, Michael, but the way I understood it was that you were anticipating some sort of report right from the start, and this should have been ongoing live from the start.
Sorry, if I may, Chairman,
we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. The other point I would suggest, and I might have got this wrong as well then, is you had concerns about the waste collection. Now, as far as I'm aware, and if Councillor...
on a point of order, may I correct the information again? I said the waste collection was good. I didn't have concerns about the waste collection. The only one I said was bulky waste. I was using waste as an example. I think you need to report me correctly.
No, you've mentioned that bulk waste wasn't still being collected. You did indicate that there were issues with the waste collection. Now, I would point out, as I was helping out at
Councillor Mr. Hoy, if you could just bear with me a sec, I will let you come back. If you can just,
I would just point out that some of the issues that were going on with the waste at the time was quite simply teams of our waste collection were going out of service because one of this group was going down with being tested positive for the virus. So repeatedly, we were firefighting, trying to find groups of employees to come in and collect the waste. The other point I would just highlight that members may not be aware of is that a lot of when the furloughing started, and this added to the waste scenario, where we would normally be collecting waste from leisure areas, i.e. parks, Cherry Orchard, we were doing possibly twice a week. we were having to do twice a day, and we were have to restructuring our operations. So I think by and large, and you know, we all have learnt from this situation, but everybody was placed in a scenario that they had never dealt with before. I think officers and members, whatever they stood up to do what they could to help. I don't think anybody did things wrong, intentionally wrong. I think things didn't always go according to plan, but sometimes they were beyond our control. As you've mentioned about the hub, and then county wanted to take it over, then it was thrown back to us. So I think, yes, we've learned from it, but I think as it was happening, you know, none of us had faced this scenario before. Nobody did anything wrong intentionally, and everybody stood up to try and be counted. I think that's all I've got to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sperrin. Councillor Mr. Hoy, if you would like to come back, I think you should have the chance.
I'm sorry, Councillor Sperrin. I think you totally misunderstood what I was saying, and I'm happy to correct the record for you. I have congratulated the refuse people on many occasions. I've asked for my thanks to be passed back through group leaders' meetings to them, doing the hard work they have done. I raised waste as something that worked and was rightly mentioned in this report as working. I've never said it didn't work. I said it worked. I said the only issue might have been bulky waste couldn't happen for a little while, and it is now back working, apart from mattresses, which I know there is a solution to, but they're still actually not quite working yet. I've at no point ever said or criticised the refuse collection at all, or in this meeting. And I'd just like that to stand, please, Chairman. Okay, that's fine. And I think your comment, you were saying that with regards to requesting information, April, I think I'm right in thinking what you're confirming is that you were just asking officers to collate the information back in April. Is that correct? For clarity, on the group leaders' calls, for members who aren't aware, all group leaders had a phone conference. It started off 3 times a week and is now once a week, regarding the pandemic and other matters. And during those calls, I said in April, I suggested that it would be a good point to start collating information around what's working, what's not working, so we could use it for future reference. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, thank you, Councillor Mr. Hoy. No other members have indicated to speak at the moment. To be honest, I've got lots and lots of questions scribbled down about the report, some of which have already been raised and answered. Others, now looking at them, seem a little bit irrelevant. I mean, I could ask them, but I think they appear quite minor now, I think, in the general context of what we've been discussing this evening. I think as I started the evening off by saying, I would expect this to be the first of several reports, and what I'm picking up from this evening, the questions that are coming forward, I think maybe future reports or starting from the next report, it may be better if a report was set out into sections possibly. And I'm just kind of putting down here some notes, for example, technology, services, finance, communications, which would then give you sections or some guidance as to what we're after. Does that sound helpful at all, or have any members got any thoughts on that?
Chairman, I'm very happy to liaise with you outside of this meeting and to agree a template of subject matter headings that you would particularly like to consider as part of a series of reports going forward, and the frequency in which those reports you'd like them to come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, the only thing I'd add to that is I think what your summary is exactly how I understood members' requests this evening as well. So I was just going to, because there was silence, so I was just going to answer your question and say, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, there was silence. I didn't think I was just waiting, but no. Yeah, so I'm thinking that everybody's questions seem to me to fall into a category. And I think it might just be more helpful if we focus on forming a report which is split into those categories. And I think that would help you going forward as well. It's quite a big topic. As Councillor Gooding said, it's a live topic that's going to keep changing. But if the report continues in that format, I think it'll be clearer for members to actually look at what's happening, and we'll be able to see as well the progress that the council is making as well. Councillor Mr. Hoy.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think you probably covered it just in the very last bit. I don't to show the progress. I think and this is what the point I was trying to make all the way through. We mustn't be afraid to say what didn't quite work, and I think that's what's lacking in this report. So I think if we just do that, what didn't really quite work, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we didn't quite get it right. And I think there's lots of things, lots of businesses and people didn't get right. And I think it's quite reasonable that we would have some of them. That was all. Thank you.
Yes. No, I couldn't agree more, Councillor Ms. Toy. And equally, I've noted some notes from this evening. There are some real positive comments and some positive feedback that have come back, which probably haven't been touched on enough in the report as well. For example, Councillor Milne has just raised a very good point about the communication and about a particular part of the website that he found useful, and Councillor Goodin reporting back in particular about the feedback that she'd got. And I think it would be useful in that going forward with regards, perhaps under the heading of communications, not just to highlight those things that didn't quite work out well, but also to put in there some good things as well. And I think equally, perhaps not enough attention on the positives has gone into this report, which again isn't a criticism because it is just the starting point, which is, I think we've all accepted, we understand. Councillor Cannell.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, just to second all of the positive comments around the reports that's in front of us, the timely manner in which it's been brought to us, in my opinion, and the commitment to it being the first of a couple or a few. Just wanted to come in, there's agreement there for yourself and Angela to look at these headings outside of the call. I'm assuming we can contribute to that by emailing yourself, Chair, ahead of those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Yes, I mean, absolutely. I will obviously speak with Angela outside of the meeting with regards to, I think we do, I can understand everybody's keenness and enthusiasm to get another report in as soon as possible, but I think we also have to have a time break in between each report in order to kind of let everything catch up as well. But absolutely, all members are welcome to contact myself or Angela, either or, with some suggestions, or if there's some topics or a category that you feel I haven't raised this evening, or that a particular point that you want included, or an additional information or data that you want included, then obviously please let either of us know, and we will absolutely endeavour to include as much as we possibly can in any future reports. Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the fact that we do need to have some subjects, and I don't think all the subjects can be dealt with necessarily at one time. I think the important thing, and just to sum up really what everyone is saying, is that the report needs to be, as far as possible, it needs to be objective. If it's positive and we know what happened to make it positive, we can replicate those learnings. If it's negative, we don't accept the negatives, we'll never get improvements. So what we need is objective assessments so that we can look at and learn what to do, what works well and what doesn't work. And I think everyone's in agreement with that. But I would like to echo the comments I think that have been made before, that I think the whole council, all the members, all the staff, and indeed all the residents have performed and worked very, very well in exceptionally difficult circumstances. And I don't think that should be acknowledged on more than one occasion, because it's not often that you see such a cooperation that we have seen in the last 5 months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree. I think whilst we are here as a review committee to be a critical friend, it's also important to give praise and thanks when we need to and when we feel it's necessary. And I think quite a few members have done that very eloquently and effectively this evening. So it is on record now that we acknowledge what a fantastic job the council have done, and that we will learn going forward. So no other members have indicated to speak on this item. The report, the recommendation on the report, it is proposed that we note the content. I move that we do note the content, but just bear in mind, members, that whilst we may not all agree with the content at the moment, this was intended to be the first of several, and it was just a starting point. And I think the future reports will be a bit more specific, and I hope that will address members' concerns. So if any members, so I'd like to move that we do note the contents of that report. If are members in agreement? If you're not in agreement, would you please raise your hand? If you are not in agreement. I can't see that any members have raised their hand, so I'm happy if Sonia is to accept that. That's a unanimous decision to note the content of that report. And obviously, members, you will see on the work plan, probably at the next meeting, once Angela and I have corresponded, and we've got a date that another report will come forward, and it will be fairly soon.
Chairman, if I may, just for good measure, I know you moved.
Yes.
I know you moved the recommendation to be noted from the chair, but can I have a
I'll
seconder to
second
that?
it. That's fine.
Sorry, I apologise.
Second it.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Sorry, members. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for that. Obviously, everybody's welcome to stay for the next item. If you don't need to stay, which is mainly aimed at officers or guests, then you're more than welcome to leave this meeting now. And if you do, then thank you for joining us. Item number 7, is the Review Committee's annual report. Again, this report's been circulated to members. It's a fairly self-explanatory report. It's an annual report that we do each year, and it has generally followed the same sort of format. Now, I am recommending that we move the report and recommend that to full council. However, I would just like to ask members whether or not they've got any objections. I have very loosely discussed this with Sonia, and when the next report is presented, I would like to possibly look at making some changes to the report, and I just want some members' thoughts on that. And that would just include us investigating what other councils are putting in their annual reports, whether there's things that we are excluding from our reports, not intentionally, but that would make the report more informative for members of the public reviewing it. I would also like to put in there for myself and for future chairman of review the opportunity to make a statement just about how they felt the year went. And if any members have got any comments on that, if they think it's a good idea or a bad idea, then let me know. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm going to slightly veer off of the actual report.
I know, sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I don't know if other members have read this, but we had an email through from the Centre for Public Scrutiny, and I think it's just worthwhile if I just read a few comments out from that, because it appertains to the overview and scrutiny guidance, and I think it's helpful, especially in the light of the reports that we're about to request. And it says basically this is about the whole council. A commitment has to begin with the council's chief executive and political leadership. A meaningful commitment accompanied by action, not just words. A cultural commitment to scrutiny is about taking action to encourage scrutiny that is challenging, uncomfortable, and potentially politically difficult. Scrutiny's part in this bargain is to recognise that its work must be designed to have an impact. And it carries on along those lines. It says the role has to be focused and carefully prioritised. And I understand what you're saying, and I understand your report, but it also says that the right of people have to be selected on the committee and to hold the position of chair, recognise the political element of chair selection. It's a very interesting report, and what you're saying about the future, I wonder if this would be helpful for, if members haven't read it, to read it, because it is talks about gathering evidence and making recommendations. As I say, not technically on the subject of your report, but appertaining to it. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. I do think you're right, and I think it would be a good idea for members to have a look at that. And perhaps with my comments earlier, members may get a better understanding of what it is I'm kind of proposing. Whilst I'm not taking anything away from the content of this report and the reports before it, I do think it's been a while since these reports have been looked at, and I do think they could be improved upon, and that's what hopefully I would like to be able to bring before the review for the next report. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was hunting for my mute button there. Yeah, I would support you in changing the report and the report style and perhaps what it reports as well. And I'm happy for that to go ahead. I just want to draw attention to a few points which possibly back up what you're talking about, but certainly back up what I'm talking about. And it's how things are reported in this report, and it's possibly something which I was alluding to in the previous item as well in some ways. So item 5, we have about ICT review, and it just says, following the term's initial report to the committee in June 2019, the team met with officers several times to monitor the migration of the council servers and associated costs to completion. It doesn't really say anything, does it? I don't know what's happening just by reading that. A member of the public wouldn't really know what's happening. It's not really giving any indication of if they're on target, not on target, what are the targets even, and how is the migration going? It just doesn't say anything on that, for instance. That's one item. Carbon neutrality as well, 10.3, so that's paragraph 10.3. It just says, at the September 2019 meeting, it was agreed that a working group would be formed. An update was received at the July 2020 meeting. It doesn't really say that the report went.
It doesn't say what was discussed, no.
Was discussed and it went to the council and the council agreed it. I think that it's not giving anything positive about it. I know I abstained on it, but still it should say what happened to it, I think. That's an example. And this runs through the report. It doesn't give 10.5. There's been one, this is around the, what one is it? It's the grass cutting or the management company report, this one, I believe.
Public event,
there's been a meeting, so why doesn't it say there's been one meeting? And again, this goes back to the whole report. It doesn't mention COVID at all, but has been delayed. Future meetings have been delayed by COVID. It could say that, so people understood why there's not been another meeting. 10.6, I think I want to suggest an alteration to this, if I may. If I read this for members, and if a member would like to, without looking up, I'll hasten to add, can they tell me what this is about? At the December 2019 meeting, the committee considered details of the private members bill, which had been considered by the last Parliament. The committee noted the bill had not progressed beyond its first reading of the House of Commons. I couldn't remember what that was about. There might be some members here with a better memory than me. I think we really need to say that it was, I did look this up, by the way, I didn't know, and it was the local electricity bill.
That's right, yeah.
Mentioned, otherwise no one knows what it's about. And then one of my favourite ones is probably paragraph 10.7, which is something we've also been speaking about tonight, which is a paragraph regarding emergency planning. That was quite an interesting meeting, I felt. I think there were a lot of points being put forward during that discussion. And a lot of points were raised that members were unhappy about emergency planning. I think it would benefit the council to know that the review committee were unhappy about emergency planning. And at the final paragraph, it was requested an updated report be presented at the April 2020 meeting regarding training for members who may be contacted out of hours. That's not what it was decided. It wasn't just training. So I'm not sure where that came from. It was lots of things beyond that, and I've lost the report for that one. I think I've just deleted it.
I mean, I think it was
of training for members, volunteers, information around communication protocol and how it can be relaunched to members, confirmation that the emergency number is more prominently placed on the council website, a testing regime for tendering out of hours emergency services, and the result of this testing, and also the fact that this had been requested for 3 years running. I think Councillor Mrs McPherson raised that. So I think that's a specific example, and I think this is where the report fails us, in that it's very bland, doesn't say very much, and doesn't say the good things that we think we've done, or the things which we still need to work on, which goes back to what actually Councillor Mrs Mason has just said in that very good report received. I'll leave it there, but can I just propose that we do change paragraph 10.6 so it refers to the local electricity bill.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Story. And largely, I couldn't agree more, and I think that's the conversation that I've had with Sonia. I do appreciate that with regards to this particular report, perhaps the person that put the report together wasn't as experienced as Paul Gowers, who is obviously no longer with us, well, no longer with the authority, sorry, I need to rephrase that. And I would like that to be just borne in mind by members. But I do agree with you, Councillor Mr Hoyer. I think that there are a few items or a few points in this report which are too brief and don't give enough. And my main concern is that this document is a publicly available document. And I think if you're a member of the public looking at that to get a better idea of exactly what we do, you may struggle. And I think it does need change, it does need updating, and hopefully that is what we will work towards. And again, as per the other item and what Councillor Cannell raised, if any members have got any idea or want to put any ideas or want any input in how they would like to see the report put together, or if there's anything they've seen other councils do that we're not doing in that report, then let me know, please, or let Sonia know, because I will liaise with Sonia on this. Councillor Milne.
Sorry, Chairman, could I come back very
quickly?
Sorry,
I've just seen
one. I know I've mentioned about the 10.6. Is that agreed that we can add about the local electricity bill to that paragraph?
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to agree with that. And if other members are as well. It was quite a brief discussion actually at the review committee, but I do think it is important that that is specified so that if anybody does look at that, they can know exactly what it is we were talking about. So I'm happy for that to be included.
And I don't know if it is possible I'm happy for it to be delegated to the chairman of the review committee, but if it could be fleshed out a little bit more in some places, such as,
yeah, I mean, it
quite simply
is something.
If it's gone to the full council, say this went to full council and was agreed, or something that simple.
Yep, absolutely. No, that's not a problem. I'll do that. So I've got a bit of a delay, I think.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, I'm on mute again.
Sorry, no, I think it's at my end. Councillor Milne.
As just a suggestion, really, if we're reviewing the way we do the annual report, it has to be a roundup of the year. So you can't drill down too much, but of course it's a modern document and it's in a modern format. So we could put appropriate evidence in either an appendix or hyperlink it. So when we get the electricity bill, somebody said, what on earth's that? We can put links in so they can go and look at it. But when we're actually considering it in the council, we've got a sort of précis of the year's work, and appropriate evidence can be put in it. So we don't have to put the entire document, I think, P&C, and we do have lots of really good material. Just it would make it a more modern document. So I'm all for that, and it then answers questions to the readers, doesn't it? If anyone's got questions about anything there, so we can have the detail, but it's a vehicle for delivering it, sort of thing. So we can also have the précis, as it were, of the year. So that's what I would suggest. Is just my view anyway.
Yep. No, thank you very much, Councillor Mill. That is the idea. Yes, is to modernise it slightly, but try and get that balance between keeping it as an overall summary, which by the very meaning is not to have a lengthy document, but to also to try and put a bit more substance in there, which I think is possibly lacking a little at the minute. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I agree with generally with the comments that have been made, and I accept that the document's quite antiquated and it needs change. But for now, we need to deal with the report that we have and that we're dealing with now. And I do agree that it needs fleshing out. It is not a report at the moment. It is not even a summary. It needs some fleshing out before it's acceptable. As a draft report, it's fine, but I mean, even if you just take the very last sentence, during the year one decision has not been subject to calling. What decision? When? That isn't, that sort of fleshing out is factual and very brief, and it should be done. What I would suggest, and I'd like to propose this, Mr. Chairman, if you're acceptable, that members that have concerns, like Councillor Hoy and anyone else, gives the concerns to you, and that you arrange the fleshing out, and to save time, because presumably you want to present this, that once you've fleshed it out, you just email it to everyone, and then if there's any concerns, then they can be addressed, unless you're prepared to wait until the next meeting. But as the document I don't think is in a finished state. So I'd like to propose that it is fleshed out. As Councillor Hoy has said, that there's some general comments on there, but they need to be slightly more specific. They need to have facts on them. They need to not necessarily have dates, but certainly an indication of the subject would help. And if you're happy as chair, and I'm sure you will be, to arrange the fleshing out and to make sure that all members of the committee are happy with that, I'm sure we'd all be happy to do that outside of committee. Otherwise, it should come back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that. I think there was a slight concern about the time that it had taken to produce the report, and a lot of that, unfortunately, is to do with issues outside of the review committee, maybe some personnel issues. But I am more than happy to look at this. I mean, like you say, Councillor Mrs Mason, as a draft report, yes, it's there, but it does need a little bit of tidying up. And I think I would tend to agree with you, and I think I'm happy to work with anybody. If there's any particular points, obviously I've noted the ones that have been raised this evening at the meeting. If there are any other items in that report that any member wants to raise with me, then that's absolutely fine. Please raise it with me. And I'm more than happy for that to be emailed to members for agreement. Councillor Hookway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, when is this report likely to be presented to full council for approval?
Good question. I would like to present it to full council as soon as possible, but I do appreciate that if members would like me to tidy it up and make it a bit more informative, which I'm happy to do, I'll have to talk to discuss this with Sonia, if that's okay, members. But it will be presented to full council as soon as possible, definitely within the next 2 full council meetings, if not the next one. I will aim to try and get it the next one. I've only got one screen as well, and I'm trying to look to see when the next full council is. Apologies.
It's the 20th of October, Chairman.
Then I would anticipate presenting it at the 20th of October. Yeah, I don't think we would need more time than that. But if members are happy with Councillor Mrs Mason's suggestion, which I am happy with myself, then that will be the plan, that I will take feedback from you. We will try and tidy this report up. I will email it out to members for comments and agreement with a view to report it or present it at the 20th of October meeting. Are members happy with that? That's my proposal. Do I need a second? I think I do.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. And if members are in agreement with that, fantastic. If members are not in agreement with that, can you please raise your hand via the icon, the raise hand icon, if you are not happy with that? No one's raised a hand, so I'll accept that members are in agreement with that, and I thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8, which is the key decisions document. Hopefully members have seen a copy of that. There are 3 items on the key decision document. If any members have got any, rather than me go through each individual item that is shown on the key decision document, have any members got any comments or questions regarding any of those key decisions that are shown out of 3? It doesn't appear that any members do, so I assume that members are. Oh, sorry, no, Councillor Mr Hoy.
I couldn't find my mute button again, I'm afraid.
That's all right.
Unmute me. It was only a quick one around page 3, 6/20, which is the Environmental Health Service Plan. Is this? I'm just a bit. I haven't had a chance to check previous reports, but I thought this was due to be done earlier. But I know this is regarded as quite a high risk area, so I just wonder if you could get information on how this is progressing, if we haven't got a suitable plan in place at the moment or an updated plan.
Okay, thank you. Sonia, can I just ask for your comments on with regards to that?
Well, it's, as you can see from the key decisions document, it stands for a decision to be made on that in September. If members want a more specific timeline, I will have to update you outside the meeting, which I can email members outside to give an update.
Yeah,
okay, I think by the sound of it, Councillor Mr Hoy, you would prefer that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I know it's just, this does come off an audit committee as quite a risky area as well on the audit committee. So I think it's, from our point of view on review, it's something we should also keep an eye on. Thank you.
Okay, so Sonia, would you be happy to do that for us and report back?
Yes, I'll report to members outside the meeting on that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I haven't, normally we would have the work plan on the agenda and it's not. I wonder if that was deliberate or an oversight, because I do have a question under that topic, if you'll allow me to put it in, or would you prefer it to another meeting?
No, I was planning to discuss the work plan today. I think originally it was missed off the agenda. Sonia, I thought that the agenda had been revised and sent round. Is that not correct? Added in showing the inclusion of the work plan.
No, the agenda hasn't been revised.
Right. Okay. Have members received the work plan, Sonia?
No.
No.
Okay. Right. Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, but if I may, the area that I was concerned with is one that I was chairing, which was the looking into the management companies. The meeting we had was 6 months
Sorry,
ago.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one second. Are you referring to the work plan?
Yes.
Okay. I will come back to you in just 1 second. It's just going back to the key decision document.
Yes, sorry.
Obviously, there was a query on the third key decision, which Sonia is going to look into for us and report back. So other than that, are other members happy with the key decision document and for Sonia to come back? If there are any objections or if anyone has any question, can you press the raise hand icon? I don't think there's going to be. I think that was dealt with. And as nobody has raised their hand, we'll take that as acceptable, and we'll move on now to the next item, which is the work plan. Members, I do apologise. Originally, the work plan was missed off the agenda, and I did raise this. It was an error. It absolutely wasn't intentional. And I hadn't realised that members hadn't received a copy of the work plan. Councillor Mrs Mason, if I can come back to you and you can raise your point, and then I'll discuss with Sonia how we progress this. But if you would like to continue, apologies for interrupting you there.
The open spaces, the question of management companies on new build sites, the officers were researching information. Now, I appreciate we've had a very busy time, and I believe that the officer that was fundamentally researching it is not at work at present. But I think it's too much of an important situation to be left for longer. It's been 9 months. So if that officer is not available, then we do need to have appropriate resources so that that committee can continue.
Councillor Mrs Mason, can I just check with you? Did the committee meet? I do.
Yes.
Recall it. When was the last time they met? Just out of interest.
December, I believe. I believe it was December, but it was said. Yes. We haven't met since March anyway, mid-February.
Okay, lovely.
So, which is understandable in the circumstances. However, and
yeah,
there was
it's not something that wants to be pushed to the side.
I don't think it should be left any longer. As well as the situation was one of safety.
Thank you for drawing that to my attention. I'll discuss with Sonia regarding officer resources on that item. I do recall it, and I do agree with Councillor Mrs Mason. I think it is important that we revisit it. Sonia, can I take some advice? As members haven't received a copy of the work plan, I have got a copy of it. Would it be prudent, I mean, for me to mention that we did discuss the work plan at the last review committee meeting. We discussed various items that weren't shown at the time, and Sonia has updated the work plan and included those items where we agreed they would fit at the moment. Sonia, I think it might be better if, are we able to circulate a copy of the work plan, obviously first thing tomorrow, to members, just for them to give them the opportunity to look at it. I don't think there'll be many questions regarding it, because I think generally overall it does now represent what we discussed at the last meeting. But certainly if any members have got an issue with the work plan, they can come back to me or yourself, Sonia, tomorrow or thereafter.
That's absolutely fine. I can email that out to members tomorrow. And you know, and obviously we can deal with any queries and issues that they might have you know, remotely.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Just to let members know that obviously the work plan has been updated by someone who is still learning the role, which was why there was a little bit of an error in the first place with it missing. But I do apologise for that. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm sure we accept that, you know, it's a complex situation and members of staff have to have learning and errors are accepted, and there's no need to apologise. That happens. But to make matters easier in the future, we have standard agendas for the review committee, which including the whipping declarations, perhaps the key decisions document, perhaps the work plan could be there in the template so it's not lost in the future, because it is an important part of our consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I completely agree, and I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest, why it was missing in the first place, because my belief was that it would have been used, a template would have been used, but it was revised and I received a copy of it, but perhaps I didn't realise that that copy hadn't been circulated to members. So I do apologise for that oversight. That's perhaps something I should have picked up on. But as we've discussed, Sonia will send that work plan round first thing in the morning, and anything on that work plan that any members have any questions, please let us know. I don't think there will be too many questions because, as I've said, it does now reflect what we discussed at the last meeting. So hopefully members will be satisfied when they see it. But obviously, any questions, please let me know. It doesn't look like anybody else has any questions. So on that note, we'll close the meeting. We'll finish the meeting. Thank you everybody for coming this evening and for attending. Keep safe and hopefully we'll see each other all soon. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye. Good night, everybody.